Hi everyone, this is Sean Dern, and as you know, I'm busy working on Season 2 these days of Queer Legends and Oral History podcast. That led me to speaking with Sarah Worthman. Sarah is investigating the persecution of queer soldiers during the First World War by the Canadian government. This next story isn't going to be part of Season 2, but it really did touch me deeply when I read Sarah's amazing research. I had to know. Who was Private Frederick Lea Hardy?
Yeah, so Private Hardy is the only known queer man on the Vimy Memorial. He was a farm boy from rural Manitoba, and he actually enlisted at the age of 15. He enlisted in early 1914, and so he was from Brandon, and he quit school essentially to help his family out on the farm. And so when the war came, he was one of the first to enlist, and he was sent overseas. And so while he was stationed overseas in Belgium, in this cute little village called Obel, Belgium, he met another soldier called Albert Goulet. And, you know, they hit things off as things do. They went to a local establishment and then found themselves in this beautiful field just nearby. They were caught together by 5 higher level military officials and were arrested. Hardy was charged, and at 17 years old, which he was at the time, he was forced to become his own lawyer, and essentially he stood in front of this trial where his sexual exploits were read publicly, and he was then publicly outed to the entire military camp at the time. And then in August of 1916, he was, given the verdict of guilty. And so he was sent to prison in the UK, where he served at the Winchester prison. And he, as I said, I mentioned those conditions, like, he spent some of the last months of his life in the lonely halls of Winchester prison, doing grueling manual labor. He couldn't speak to anyone except for a priest. And then, Vimy Ridge happens in April 1917, and suddenly the Canadian military is very much in need of new men. So they call for him to come back to the front, and he does. He comes back, obviously, and he fights as part of the August 1917 offensive, which was called Hill 70. And it's actually at Hill 70 that he died. His body was never recovered, and as a result, he is on the Vimy Memorial today. And so he was commemorated through that, and also commemorated through his sister, who named her firstborn son after Frederick.
There's no doubt there are other gay soldiers and bisexual soldiers on the memorial, but he is the only one that we can confirm that was a gay or bisexual man.
Exactly, yeah. So he is the only known, is how I like to kind of say it, but he's the only known queer man on the Vimy Memorial, and you can actually go and visit his name, and it's this, incredible touch point now that we have as 2S LGBTQ plus Canadians on this, symbol of Canadian history. Yeah, but unfortunately, there hasn't been a lot of public discussion about his name, or even knowledge that he's on there from any official channels, which is why I'm doing this work, to really try to get the story out there, because I feel like I owe it to Frederick, and I owe it to, soldiers like Silvio Russo or Alexander Mackenzie, who is the only queer man on the Men in Gate. I really feel like I owe it to them to get these stories out there. I want to do whatever I can, and so that's part of this project and part of coming on this podcast.
Private Hardy wasn't the only gay or bisexual Canadian soldier in the First World War, and you're going to hear more from Sarah on that in Season 2 of Queer Legends. Thank you for listening. This episode was researched by Sarah Worthman, writing, recording, and technical production by me, Sean Dern, and the executive producer is Ian Capstick. Queer Legends, an oral history podcast, is available wherever you go for great storytelling.